Maurice? Does that work for you? I've got a list of announcements, sorry. And we're trying to do something different. We're still being asked for proclamations and things like that. And I know we discussed doing them differently. I'm just going to give a shout out and then we'll promote them on social media, but we're not going to actually read proclamations on the webinar. Anyway.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Well, I think right now it just doesn't, yeah.
Flo.
Hello?
I love it.
Michael.
Flo is like the guy, what was that home improvement show where you never saw the guy's face?
Oh yeah. Tool time.
If you're in her office, you see the top of her head. She has a mask on. It's incredible.
Are we sure it even is Flo?
I already got a beep from somebody. I don't know who's beeping. Welcome, Kelly. I saw Joe just a minute ago. Hung Bin, are you on? We can't see you.
Can you just use Daddy's phone, please? Does anybody want 2 children?
Been there, done that.
Promise you'll miss it later.
Not sure.
I didn't believe that. Yeah, I didn't believe it either.
No, but there is a Descendants dance party going on in my house if anybody.
Ooh.
That's all right.
All right. Hong Bin, we can't see you. Are you coming on video? And Alan saying we can't see you either. There you are. Welcome.
Going.
Hello.
Good. Look, you dressed up for this. That's nice.
Oh yeah. Council meeting.
All
Gotcha.
right, stand up and let's see what pants you have on.
I've got great slacks on. Thank you very much.
We don't do those kinds of checks. I'm sorry. Nope. Hi, welcome on in.
I like your background, Pam.
Oh, it's Earth Day.
Yeah.
All right, so got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're missing Ty. Michael, will you text him to make sure he's coming for us, please? Thank you.
Amy, do you need sound checks? You're muted.
Yeah, Hongbin, we haven't heard you speak, but I saw you. Oh, she left. There she goes. Can you make sure we can hear you? Can you unmute yourself?
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Good job. Thank you.
Good.
Alan, your picture's back off. There you go. Okay. Just making sure. Hello, Brian. Okay, well, doing good. Well, we'll go over this with the public when we officially start the meeting, but we had a practice session and Michael's going to help people transition from who want to speak from the attendee mode to the panelist mode. We'll be announcing just similar to what we do regularly, announcing 2 names with the first name coming on. It does take a few seconds for the transitions to happen, so please be patient, and we're still trying to work out all the details on this. So I'll be making an announcement just so you guys are knowing what's coming too. And we do ask you to keep everything muted while you're not speaking so we don't pick up a lot of background noises. And then a lot of our staff who you can see joined here are also just showing up this way so that we have fewer pictures and distractions going on, but also just to make sure we're not reverberating back as well. There's Ty, welcome. Can you unmute and say hi so we can check your sound, please?
Hi, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Living life.
Okay, all right. Now you can mute yourself back, sorry. There you go. We're getting ready. We already have attendees. For those of you who came in late, we already have people listening in, and we're excited to try this concept. So it's also going to be streaming, but it still doesn't come across as well on channel 18 as you've seen. I don't know if you guys have gone back to watch that, but we're working it. It has to do with our equipment from what I understand, and trying to figure out, we'll have to figure out something moving forward about equipment that can handle this newer technology. So if you have people wanting to watch it, if you can recommend they do it via the website, that would be easier for them to see and hear.
We have probably about 1 minute before
Okay.
we're ready, if you're also ready.
Yes, and we're not playing the video before the meetings anymore, right?
We've got just on the government channel. On the
Okay.
screen.
Yeah, just not in here. Okay. All right.
Does anybody else have a beeping on there?
It rings as someone joins in.
Because it's going beep, 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 beep,
Mhm.
beep.
Or a ding dong or something.
No, I'm
I
just
get a
getting a
doorbell.
beeping.
So, okay.
Yeah, maybe it's mine, my system.
I do hear it too.
We're ready for you.
Okay. Well, good evening and welcome everyone to the April 22nd special Town Council of Chapel Hill meeting. We are trying this new platform again for a virtual meeting. We are trying to include more public input via the virtual setting. So we look forward to hearing. We have some people registered to speak, but those of you that are out there, you can apply to speak and we will try to recognize you. And we'll go through that in a minute, but I just want to say we're trying to do this. You can also see this streamed on channel 18, the government channel, or see it streamed live on your computer via the town website or later via Granicus. It'll be out there for you to see. I want to say happy Earth Day to everyone with the background here. It is the 50-year anniversary of the start of Earth Day, even though the Earth's been here a little longer than 50 years. There's lots of celebrations going on virtually and outdoors today. It's also a new moon phase, I was told. This year's theme for Earth Day is climate action, and Chapel Hill's committed more than ever to reducing our carbon footprint through some climate actionable items that we've been working on. But we need everyone to be part of this. So I know you're at home doing incredibly different things right now, but we encourage you to think of ways to also take some climate action. We're also soliciting public input for our climate action plan through our online survey, and we would love for you to fill that out. It takes about 12 minutes to fill out, so please go to the town website and fill out the climate action survey. And I made my first singing debut on the Eno River celebration today. Please do not. That's not one of my skill sets, but it's a wonderful video celebrating Earth Day in the Eno with lots of different mayors and other people included on that. So that was a lot of fun. Anyway, we're going to have a COVID update, and then we will ask, we have at least one member of the public who has signed up to speak on something not on the printed agenda. So we will hear our update, and then I will come back with some more announcements for you all. So we're going to turn this over to our manager, Maurice Jones, and welcome to everybody out there, and thanks for attending.
Thank you, Mayor. Can everyone see the presentation? Great. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am Maurice Jones, Town Manager for the Town of Chapel Hill. We'd like to take a few moments to share a brief update with Council and our community on our town's response and coordination efforts associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. In this presentation, We will provide an overview of our response efforts, share a few key updates with you, and take a look forward at the coming days, weeks, and months ahead. Kelly Drayton is the town's emergency management coordinator, and she will now provide an update for us on the town's response to the pandemic. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Jones, and good evening, Mayor and Council. I wanted to take just a few moments to talk about our town's response. Numerous town, local, and regional partners continue to work together on the response to this pandemic, from translation of critical messaging to answering community questions and needs. And I wanted to highlight just a few examples of this. We continue to operate a countywide donation drive that operates on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And to date, we've collected just over 3,000 items of food. Our communications team is working to provide accurate and timely information. They continue to update the town's COVID-19 resource documents and webpage, and they maintain an active social media presence. This week, our messaging focused on inclusion, and our very own Police Chief Blue recorded a video on this topic that was interpreted into Burmese, Korean, Spanish, and Mandarin. And we continue to work to provide for those who are most vulnerable within our community. Chapel Hill Carborough City School feeding effort continues, and last week they served approximately 2,000 students per day with this effort. Last Wednesday, we served over 1,500 individuals through a partnership with the Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina and Porch that serves Orange County residents. We've provided over 47 rent changes to our public housing residents due to changes in income. And we continue to provide outreach and share important messaging and resources with numerous community groups, including 50 different community partners and human services agencies, over a dozen immigrant and refugee organizations, 51 different faith communities, and over 90 different neighborhood organizations and HOAs. I will turn it back over to Mr. Jones to talk a little bit about some of our key updates over the last week.
Thank you, Kelly. Our Emergency Operations Center continues to coordinate with our local, regional, and state partners. Last week, as many of you heard, Governor Cooper announced a framework for gradually reopening the state's economy that will hinge on three critically important steps. One, the availability of widespread testing. Two, extensive efforts for contact tracing. And three, a downward trend in the number of positive cases and hospital rates. So those are three very important steps that would have to occur. And we would have to see significant progress, I think, for reopening our economy here in the state of North Carolina, and then also doing the same with our stay-at-home order, lifting that and reopening here in Chapel Hill. FEMA released additional guidance on COVID-19 expenses that are considered reimbursable, specifically providing clarification around sheltering and food distribution. That's very important for local governments who are looking to provide that assistance to folks who are most in need. And Congress is expected to approve an additional $500 billion relief package tomorrow that could help replenish the small business loan program and provide additional money for hospitals and coronavirus testing. So those are some of the big updates from the state and from the federal government, and we'll be watching those actions very closely. So as we look forward, we will continue to work with our partners to address the increased demand for emergency support operations. We're working on a mass feeding plan to provide assistance to those who are struggling. As Kelly mentioned earlier, we've had a lot of folks who've been served by the food drives that we've been offering. Once again, today we had a successful food drive where we had over 400 people, 400 households that were served. We will have the exact numbers on that in the next couple of days, but it is definitely a need in our community, as we all know, and we're working closely with Orange County to continue to provide food for folks and work with our nonprofit partners in the community as well. And then the replenishing of personal protective equipment for our first responders is also something that we're spending a lot of time on and focus on to make sure they have the equipment they need to keep themselves and the people they treat safe. We're also discussing how and when to lift the stay-at-home restrictions in a way that is responsible and coordinated and is focused on public health and safety. And finally, the long-term recovery. We have established a recovery team, which will be integrating with the county in a community-wide planning effort to restart our economy and to reopen our community. We will have more on that effort in the coming days and weeks for more information for the council and for folks in our community about how we begin to recover from this crisis and this pandemic. With that, we'll take any questions that the council may have for us.
Need to see them first. You want to just raise your hand if you have a question. I can share. Thank you for Maurice and Kelly for sharing. I can assure you there's a lot of conversations and coordination and collaboration going on, not only within our county, but also with our neighbors and with the rest of the state. Metro mayors met today online with the Small Business Administration group to talk about how we can reopen and bring some businesses back. We're also going to be talking on Friday. Today was about retail. We're going to talk on Friday about restaurants, but it was very interesting phone call from the Merchants Association. They're trying to navigate a path forward as we begin to relax restrictions in the future. We're not talking right now, so I don't want anybody to panic. And how to prepare. You've seen some changes go on the retailers who have continued to operate, like the grocery stores and some of the essential services. You've seen some good things implemented. Those supplies are hard to get, though. They talked about a situation where one of the convenience stores, he owns 5, but he can only get 4 of the plastic shields and the equipment. So there's still a supply shortage on some of the equipment needed to practice good safety protocols, but they're working hard. One of the noted needs right now is kids' summer clothing. A lot of folks and people are staying home, and it was cooler weather, and kids grow fast, as we know, and there's not places to buy this. And it was further mentioned about how local retailers really do help with local communities. Not everyone can shop on places like Amazon. If you don't have a credit card or you don't have checking account, you don't have those things, you can't order online. So you count on those local stores that you can go to. And some of the stores that are still open, the bigger chain ones, are running low on the kinds of supplies of kids' clothing, things like that. So that was an interesting, just talking about that and thinking that. Recently, Durham started requiring that people wear masks. We've been talking to Mayor Steve about visual and about why they made those choices and moving forward. I will say, I'm so proud of our community. Our community has done a really great job of practicing good safety protocols. If you're out and about, you'll see that people are wearing masks in our stores voluntarily. People are sewing masks. Yesterday, some volunteers made masks for all the Meals on Wheels recipients. So they had got homemade masks that were delivered. They're starting to need some supplies too. But our community has been doing a really amazing job respecting and listening to the information. I get to listen to national phone calls about all the things that they're learning, discovering the science behind fighting this virus, the things they know, the things they don't know, the things they're trying. Without giving them more time to find out more information is only going to yield a better result in the long run. The biggest fear is opening up too quickly and having a second wave come that's even more deadly than the original first surge or wave. They're calling it a wave now. So that's why we've flattened that curve. So they're calling it more of a wave than a surge in our area. It's still yet to come. It's coming. We've been able to stave it off by doing these good practices that we've had. So we are working in coordination with the other mayors as well and the governor's office to determine what we do with our stay-at-home order, which is set to expire next week. I think you can look for an announcement by the end of this week about the plans are. Schools are still closed until at least May 15th. We're thinking that may be extended. We've heard from a lot of our community parents that even if it was extended, if it was not extended, they still weren't going to send their kids back for that time period. So we've got a lot of things to work out, and this is an evolving situation every day. I also want to say, so grateful for the incredible healthcare we have in our community, the heroes that are out there working the front lines. We have amazing healthcare in our region. I want to say how grateful we are for our essential town employees, especially our manager and his team. They're working nonstop. They're putting themselves out there. They're doing everything possible to ensure the safety of our community. We understand that this is a very challenging economic time as well. We will get through this. I need you to be patient, to be kind. I need you to help be supportive of our town crews. We are working as hard as we can. This is uncharted territory, and we're starting to see some exhaustion from constantly changing and evolving situations, but we're not seeing an exhaustion of the attitude of our wonderful employees. So they've been just great. So that's going on. I want to add to Kelly's food distribution and overall response. Food distribution is going to need to go on for a lot longer than whenever we open up and come back together. People who have lost their jobs for a period of time aren't going to be able to bounce right back out of this like people who are continuing to work from home or have jobs that have been able to have a safety net for them. We're going to need this food distribution. We are ramping up efforts with the food bank. The food bank's ramping up efforts. We are getting better coordination, but our local food nonprofits that are working so hard still need more help. They need those food donations, they need those monetary donations, and they also need volunteers now. We're having volunteers do set things so that they're not being exposed, but they're trying to use the same volunteers for the same regular shifts, so we're not having too many people plugged in. If you know of folks or you're willing to find that can help volunteer, please have them reach out. They can call our hotline, or they can connect directly with Porch, Table, IFC. Although they're so overwhelmed just running operations, it makes a little more sense. You're welcome to send an email to my office and we will try to connect you in if you know folks that are willing to help. But I want to give a special shout out to the Chapel Hill Service League. It's their 80th anniversary this year. This is a group that helps service. There's made up of volunteers that help do incredible things in our communities. And we will post some more on our social media about their 80th birthday and things they do, but we want to say thank you so much. You're also welcome to call our town call center, the 919-969-5005 number. That's on our website as well, and find out other ways that you can plug into all that is going on. Couple other announcements. Sorry, I'm just rolling, then we'll get to the public comment. All right, guys, census. How many of you have filled out your census, council members? Raise your hands, raise your hands. Okay, proud, good, good, good. So Chapel Hill, a 57% is not the grade we're going for. We need to do better. It takes 5 minutes, 5 minutes. Please fill out your census form. This is how we get our CDBG monies, our monies for all kinds of things that happen in our town. And it's going to be more important than ever. This goes for the next 10 years. More important than ever this year to get an accurate count because we have grown. So we need you to fill out those census forms. They're not going to track your data. They're not going to check up on you. They do it by residential unit number. Please fill out your census form. All right. I want to say that when we get to the consent agenda, item number 5 has already been pulled. It's about the appointments to advisory board being on hold. We wanted to get some more information. We wanted to do some more communication before we consider this move of moving advisory board reappointments to the fall. More details to follow as we work on this. So sorry, that one has been pulled. Several advisory boards are meeting tomorrow at 11. The Criminal Justice Debt Program Advisory Committee will meet. These are all virtual, just so you're clear. Next Monday, April 27th at 6:30 p.m., the Community Design Commission will meet. And on Tuesday, April 28th at 11 a.m., the Public Transit Partners Committee will meet. These agendas are posted on our calendar. And again, please be patient as we try to update the calendar with these new special meetings. Public is welcome to attend. We're incorporating that part into our advisory board meetings as best we can with this Zoom platform, and we appreciate your comments. You're always also welcome to send your comments in via email or phone calls. Email is probably a little faster just because we have to pull it off the phone at the office and bring it back, but we'd love to hear from you. All right, so we're gonna, I'll come back to announcements from council members. We're gonna let our public speak and then I'll come back to you, I promise. We're gonna give this a try. I have one person that I know of signed up to speak on items not on the printed agenda. And this is a trial, so please be a little patient. We're gonna ask people. Mr. Parker is going to bring you into the meeting. We're going to announce your name, but we ask you to announce your name yourself just to verify that's who you are. Again, we really wanna hear from you, but we will have the same protocols we do when we meet face-to-face where you have 3 minutes to share. And we ask you to be respectful of of names and people and places, and just like you always are in town hall, so that shouldn't be a big deal. And then we will transfer you back into the attendee mode versus the panelist mode. We'd love to see you too, if you're welcome to have your video on, but that's not necessary. I know we have some people that are on by phone as well. Those will take a little bit more to figure out who you are, so we'll definitely need you to announce yourself. So, Michael, I'm going to let you, the first person we have signed up to speak on items not on the printed agenda is Eve Ing. Is Eve out there?
I do not have.
Yeah, she's not
so-
one of the attendees.
She's not one of the attendees? All right. Michael, I might have you keep on a lookout for that since she signed up, and we'll get her, because she signed up to speak again on the concept plan, and maybe she can share her comments then. I also let council know that the chat function is on, and if someone sends us a communication, we'll be maybe reading those out loud. We're trying to figure that all out, but they are entered as public record. We have turned off your chat function just to yourselves interpersonally. You can, if whatever you type there goes to everyone and is part of the public record, just so you're aware. So just so you know. All right. Jess, you had something you wanted to share. I'm going to go with first names because this is just so complicated anyway. So Jess, you had something to share?
No, I don't have anything to share. I just am slow, and I actually had a question about the COVID response, so I thought I would wait until
Good.
it was not the right time anymore.
Okay.
Apparently. So I had two questions. The first was, I know I'm personally very thankful that our governor is following,
Science.
science, yeah, believing in science. But I know that there are some neighboring states who are maybe making some not so great choices. So, what are we doing, North Carolina and Chapel Hill, about preventing folks? We always love and we're welcoming community, except for when you're opening your tattoo parlors on Friday. So, like, what does that mean for us?
Yeah, it's a good question. We would be coordinating any sort of response like that. We'd probably coordinate with our partners regionally and at the state level. I don't believe we have any sort of plan in place right now to try to address that. But certainly it's a conversation that will take place as some of the states around us are reopening. I'm not sure to what degree we could stop folks from coming to Chapel Hill. I know there have been attempts to do that in other places, but we could certainly try to educate folks as they're coming into our community. But we'll have some conversations with our regional partners and state partners to see what more can be done there.
Yeah, thank you. And then, Mayor, when you were mentioning how people are going to need food for a lot longer than the actual stay-at-home order, that reminded me of one of my questions, which is, not just food, but are we getting a sense of what some of the long or longer term impacts are going to be? And how are we beginning to think about planning for those, or even, what have we identified so far?
So there's two different task force that I'm aware of. One is working on sheltering folks that are currently homeless, and how do we transition our current shelter folks into a safer situation. The other group's working on the long-term impacts of people with rent and utility assistance, and we're putting together a way to help people with that situation and a sort of a chain so people don't fall through. They've already started with identifying 20 units of people. So we don't, families or groups of people that were already on the list for eviction notice, and we're going to be working with them first because it's likely that didn't change much during this scenario. And so I know that Maurice's team has offered staff members to help with this coordination and planning and trying to figure out what those long-term impacts for individuals, as well as we're working with the chamber on long-term impacts of reopening businesses and what that means and how we can be more helpful and how we work together to make this a reality. Again, this is evolving every day, but originally, and we're going to start sharing the notes as best we can from these bi-weekly meetings that we have. Is that how you say it? Twice a week? Meetings we have with all the updates. Things have just been evolving so fast, and we've been concentrating on the things that we were asked to by the state, which was number one was getting PPEs to all of the essential employees that we needed, and we're still working on that. We've done a little better now. Things are starting to come in. The hospital system's been working with us, and people have been making their own masks, but we've been working on that. Two was the food supply chain, to figure that out and to get people the help they need, because the eviction restrictions have been in place by the North Carolina Supreme Court. No evictions can happen right now. No utility cutoffs can happen right now. So people who have shelter currently can get to stay there. So how do we feed them? The third was to work with our long-term care facilities. We're going to give you some more updates on that coming forward. But when I asked on Tuesday, there are 42 congregate long-term care facilities in our county. We have partnered with UNC Hospital's healthcare system to help us with training. They've enlisted the school nurses who aren't currently working in the school setting to help with the testing and the strike teams. We are handling all the long-term care facilities in our community and trying to get good safety protocols, as we know those are hot spots. So those were the three top priorities. Next level is starting to plan for the reopening and what that means for all sectors. But I'll be honest with you, we still have a lot of food planning to do. As we know, we're not reaching everyone, and the need is growing. We're growing between 4,000 and 5,000 meals a week. So that need is going to continue to grow. We think there'll be a little bit of a dip in that need as people receive their stimulus checks, but then it's going to rise back again. And it depends on when we open to how long that will last. And no one really has the barometer on that yet. They know it'll be a lot longer than just this summer. So we're trying to figure out the long-term food distribution, the long-term effects of people being able to stay in their places, and the long-term effect of people finding jobs as the economy opens back up again, and the long-term effect of small businesses who are really struggling now. I don't know if you've been following all the information about cities and municipalities getting funding from the federal government. That was not part of this recent package. So we're trying. I mean, yeah. They're aware. I mean, it's not that they don't, it's just they're trying to do the things. But as you know, the first package they passed got used up pretty quickly, and there was a lot of hurdles to clear in just getting the money out to folks. Now they're trying to do the same thing with getting the money to the hospitals for all the testing that's going on, so they can increase all the testing. They're trying to get the monies where they're most directly needed. Again, I love that our community bases their decisions on science. You will find that almost all the metro mayors are pinging on the governor's office to follow best science practices. And again, because of our incredible healthcare systems here, they're all part of the governor's conversation and part of the governor's team on making these decisions. We still don't have enough testing in North Carolina. We still don't have enough PPEs, but they're starting to come in. So that's very, very helpful. The new testing that's going on for the antibodies is in clinical trials now. We're going to learn more. And so that'll affect the opening and reopening of things as well. Right now, they know they can test for the antibodies. They just don't know if you're still contagious or not. So that's the problem. And they have to have a longer period of time. And the longer time we can give them without being overwhelmed in the hospital work itself, then the more time they'll have the answers and know how to move forward with these things. I don't know if you're following some of the Mecklenburg County, but if they stay on the path they're on, and if they reopened and the surge or another wave hit, they would need over 2,000 hospital beds is what was predicted all at once. And that's not a possible, that's too many. So again, trying to flatten out those responses, trying to have more science and more data points so they can help folks. Karen?
Thank you for that extra information. It's so wonderful to hear some of the ways that the community is pitching in to help. And I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Justin Haslett and Playmakers Repertory. They have turned their costume shop into making face masks, and reached out to them. IFC needed some masks, and they responded with 125 masks a couple days later. So just wanted to give them a shout out and a thank you, and just one of the so many ways that the community is helping each other right now, which is really just terrific.
Yeah, great. Hung Bin?
Because our town in Orange County, we have our shelter in place announced separately from the state announcement. So when we are coming back, reopen the economy, is that going to be at the same time, like follow the state's order, or we are going to have our separate decision making? Or how is that going to move forward?
That's a really good question. The Orange leaders, the four of us, the Orange County chair and the three mayors, we work in concert with each other and the health director. We've been looking, the governor has announced that he'll be making an announcement this week. We're waiting to see what that is. Right now, our stay-at-home order lasts a day longer than the state one. So the governor did say that the stay-at-home order, whichever stay-at-home order is more restrictive, is the one you should follow. Although I understand there's been a case filed to say that that's not going to be allowed anymore. We don't know the answer to that. So again, this isn't a constantly evolving. The leaders, Orange leaders, we've agreed to meet again tomorrow and Friday to be ready with our own stay at home. We've been talking to Durham, depending on what the governor's doing. If the governor extends the stay at home order, we will probably just latch onto that one for now. But it depends on what it is, to be honest with you. There's some things health-wise that are just different in our community. We're not quite as dense as some of the other larger municipalities. And we are seeing good compliance here. We had a lengthy discussion today about curfews. We're not seeing that kind of problem here in our community. So there's just different things and different municipalities are experiencing, and we're all sharing together. So it was interesting. The big cities talked about they're in different places in all of this. So I wish I could give you a better answer other than we will do what we think is best for this community, and the power is given to the health director and apparently I have some as mayor and the other mayors do too, to make some of these orders, but we're going to try to do what's best to keep us safe in many ways. And we're hopeful that the governor's order will do that. With schools being closed till May 15th at least, we think we're going to see an extension to May 15th at least. And you saw that for council meetings, we've already extended to the end of May. So I think that gives you an indication of how seriously we take this and that what we're looking to do. And I will say it doesn't mean we might not amend our order to open up a few things that have deemed to be safer. I just don't know what to tell you. That we depend on science.
Okay, so when we are considering when or how to reopen, would require like face covering part of the plan? Are we considering that is because there are cities that are considering that they can gradually open, and having people wear like a mandatory requirement for people to wear face covering is one of the intermediate steps before they completely open the economy.
And I hear you, and we had a talk with Mayor Steve Schul about this while they did it in Durham. I will tell you on the two different national mayor phone calls I was on just last week, the mayors that had enacted that said they recommended not doing that. They said they had more pushback and more problems and more protests that brought people together and more abuse of the system. There were also some disparities between different groups wearing masks, and that was a huge concern. I will tell you this, we have great compliance in this community about mask wearing in general. And one of the steps was considered is that not requiring, but recommending that people wear masks when they are entering other stores or places of business or in any indoor, but then maybe outside, we wouldn't mandate it outside and get people to continue practicing physical distancing. That nationally, they've asked us to start calling it that instead of social distancing. So we start calling it physical distancing. I'm not sure. We have, like I said, we've had great compliance and we see people wearing the masks. So it's still part of the discussion, but we didn't feel the need to amend our order at this time. Okay. There's no more questions, comments. We're going to move on. Did we have anyone show up, Amy, or Michael, for things not on the printed agenda?
Nope.
Okay. That brings us at this point to the consent agenda. A reminder that item 5 has been removed, and just since it was the new platform, the consent agenda has some budget ordinances that we need to change because of what's going on. It has naming the Elliott Road Flood Storage Project, the Booker Creek Basin Park on there. Work is going to start soon on that storage. It's one of the town's top stormwater priorities. It's going to start very soon. It's going to look very different over there in the short term, but really wonderful in the long term, as it'll be part park and part stormwater retention. It's really going to reduce the flooding in the East Gate, East Franklin Street area quite a bit, and it will release water very slowly downstream. So putting this in is going to not affect downstream communities or neighborhoods. But the wonderful thing is making a park out of it's going to be really, really beneficial to the community. It'll have a trail around it, an overlook. You're going to see equipment out there for the short term, and you will see some vegetation removed, but new vegetation will be put in that will grow pretty quickly that's adapted for stormwater and a lot of flooding and water issues. So we're excited about this project. It's been a long time in the works, as you know, and I commend the staff for finally getting it all worked out. There were a lot of legal details. It's taken a lot of time, but we're very, very excited to get moving on this project and to have a park. Also on the, huh?
I'll move the consent agenda.
Okay, hang on, I'm gonna finish. There's also the conditional zoning atlas amendment application for the Sunrise Road Stormwater Management Utility Advisory Board to hear the Weaver's Grove application process. So just want to make sure people were looking at the agenda. So the consent agenda has been moved by Ms. Anderson, seconded by Mr. Nguyen. Any comments on this? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. I guess I should have you raise your hands because it's a little hard to get here. Motion seems to be unanimous unless I got, okay, thank you very much. I will tell you that the petitions list isn't getting a whole lot of attention right now. I'm sorry to say, but we have other priorities going on. We take them seriously. There's some items that are still being worked on, but we haven't been able to make as much progress. We're reviewing it to see where we can make some progress, but our staff has got some pretty, a lot of other things to be working on right now. So I want to make sure people know that we'll come back to that. I will tell you that we are trying as hard as we can. Maurice and I meet to talk about what items we need to get done during this time and what items can actually wait. We just don't know what we're waiting until is the problem. We don't know if we're going to be face-to-face in June. We're trying to figure this out. So I'm sorry, you just got to be patient. You're going to get an update next week about where all the different development projects are. And then I hope to get an update to you about whether some of the other items that we've been working on, where they are. Some of the items that we've been working on seemed timely, and some of them are more important to have face-to-face meetings where the public can actually physically attend and be part of the discussion. So we're trying to make those determinations, and I'm sorry that it's going to keep doing every week. It's going to be a little different, and we're trying as hard as we can. So that being said, one of the items coming up is adopting a revised meeting schedule. Is that what you're going to share with us, Maurice? Okay. And then we're going to have a concept review plan. And I'll talk more about the concept review plan right before that. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm here before you again to present a revised meeting schedule for this body for the next 6 weeks. As you may recall, the Council approved the schedule for January through June back in November of last year. A couple months later, of course, the COVID-19 crisis arrived at our shores, and due to public safety concerns, we shut down all of our public meetings, including council meetings, to protect the council, our advisory board members, our staff, and the public. And during that period, we have now had to find different ways for us to hold our meetings during this local and state stay-at-home order. And so the platform we have chosen to conduct these meetings is Zoom. We believe it gives us the flexibility we need to conduct business while offering a robust public participation at the same time. And those are two of our main goals as we develop a plan to hold public meetings in this new environment. Our focus has been on continuing the business of the people, ensuring we are open and transparent, providing our community with the opportunity to hear the council and the advisory boards deliberate on very important issues, while also giving the public the chance to have their voices heard. And of course, to keep people as safe as possible as we all work together to get through this pandemic. So here's the meeting schedule that we are presenting, the revised schedule. It will help formalize our meetings through the end of June with the hopes that we will return to our normal schedule and regular business meetings in June if conditions on the ground have improved in our community and in our state. The revised schedule is on your screen. We would have a virtual special meeting with the council on April 29th and then again on May 6th and May 20th. We would also have 2 special work session meetings on May 13th and May 27th. And as I mentioned, if all goes well and our town, our county, and our state are returning to normal by June, we will resume with regular meetings of the council at that time, with regular business meetings scheduled for June 10th and June 24th, and 2 work sessions scheduled for June 3rd and June 17th. So our staff recommendation this evening is for the council to approve the resolution adopting a revised meeting schedule to hold special meetings in a virtual environment through May 31st or until the Orange County stay-at-home order is lifted.
Thank
I'll
you.
move the revised meeting schedule.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Anderson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Parker. Any discussion? Sorry, we didn't get to have any discussion. Good. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Michael, there you go. Any opposed, please say nay and raise your hand. Motion is unanimous. Thank you for updating. I'll remind council that you'll also be having some closed sessions virtually coming up as we move through our attorney appointment process. That is still actively ongoing, and Mr. Parker is helping run that process. So you'll be hearing more updates from him. And thank you to Michael for helping run that, as there's so much going on right now. And it's an important process to do well. All right. That brings us to our concept plan review for 125 East Rosemary Street. Again, I remind council, this is a concept plan only. We are not voting this evening on this. We are not discussing all the numbers and things. This is totally a concept plan. I know you've been expecting the TIA report. You're going to get that. It came in too late to have it ready for tonight's meeting. You're going to have that information for our CCES meeting next week on Friday morning. We are also going to talk about the economic development agreement and the numbers and all those things. That will be next Friday next week, so you have some time. Tonight is about the actual concept of the plan. A reminder that this parking deck, if it was to move forward, is our parking deck. It's not someone else's. So if you like things, don't like things, the town would be paying, not paying, incorporating. Just to remind you, this is important though. So we want to hear your comments and feedback on this parking deck. This particular property is why it's moving forward is because it is in an opportunity zone. We've gotten no confirmation yet from the federal government that they are considering extending opportunity zones at this point. So we have to move along as if this is how we do, because there would have, if this was to go forward, it would have to be entitled by the end of June. So that's why you're seeing this one come forward. And we're working so hard, and staff's been working around the clock trying to get the information. So we do have some members of the public who are signed up to speak on this. If there are members of the public who want to speak, if you can send a note in or just be in there and raise your hand, we will call you in during the time when we have public comment, where first we'll have a presentation. Then we'll have clarifying questions from the council. Then we'll have the public come in, and then we'll have comments back from the council. Again, we're not voting, we're sharing comments, and so that the designers can help work on our project as it's proposed. Is that clear for everyone? Okay, so I turn it over to whoever's doing the presentation. I lost our managers. I can't see who that's going to be. Is that going to be Michael Sudol? Thank you.
It is. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Michael Sudol, and allow me to pull up this. All right. Once again, good evening. My name is Michael Sudol with the Chapel Hill Planning Department. I have 9 slides, and it'll take about 5 minutes to present this concept plan for the 125 East Rosemary Street parking deck. The application before you tonight is a concept plan, as the mayor has already said. As a refresher, there are a few key things to remember about concept plans. This is where the applicant, or in this case, the development team, is presenting a rough initial sketch. Staff doesn't conduct a formal review of concept plans, but instead forwards the sketch to the advisory boards and council for preliminary feedback. If the applicant decides to move forward with a formal submittal following comments, there are multiple development options. The first is a special use permit, the second is conditional zoning, and lastly is a development agreement. In this case, conditional zoning has been selected as the preferred option. With that in mind, the recommendation before you tonight is the adoption of Resolution R8, transmitting comments to the applicant regarding the proposed development. The site is located on Rosemary Street in the Town Center 2 zoning district. The Franklin Rosemary Historic District can be seen in green to the east on this map, and the Northside Neighborhood Conservation District in yellow to the west. The site itself is highlighted in red on the north side of East Rosemary Street. The concept plan proposes to demolish the existing 276 space parking deck and the adjacent parking lot. A new 1,100 space parking deck would be built across both lots. The parking will ultimately serve both the town's parking needs and the 136 East Rosemary Street Innovation Hub. Here's a site view plan of the existing conditions. Rosemary Street runs along the south side of the parcel, with the parcel boundary shown here in green. The existing parking deck is shown here in orange, with the surface lot to the east. It is mostly gravel, but there are some portions of asphalt still present on the site, shown here in red. This is the concept plan as it was submitted. Once again, the site boundary is shown in green, with Rosemary Street running along the south property line. The new parking deck is shown in orange, spanning both lots. Please note that the design has been modified since these materials were submitted, and the applicant will review the revised design with you tonight. The Community Design Commission met on April 2nd and offered comments. These comments are in your packet on pages 88 through 90. So once again, the recommendation before you tonight is the adoption of Resolution R8, transmitting comments to the applicant regarding the proposed development. We have an opportunity for clarifying questions right now, and the development team is also here with a presentation. Thank you.
Are there any clarifying questions for Michael? Okay, we'll move on. Joe, are you, Mr. Dye, are you presenting now?
I'm here. Thank you, Mayor Heminger and Council. Let me first start by thanking Manager Jones and all the staff at the town that are working so hard on this project and everything else that they're doing to process the business of the town. With me tonight are Michael Stevenson. I'm Joe Dye with Grove Properties. With me tonight is Michael Stevenson with Perkins & Will, the architect, design architect for this project, and George Retchley with Ballantyne & Associates, the civil engineer for the project. And without further ado, we're excited to share our progress on the design and receive public input and council's input. I'm going to turn it over to Michael for our presentation. I'm going to go mute and off video until we get to any questions you all might have of any one of us on the team. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Town Council. Are you seeing my screen, a yellow title slide?
We are.
Thank you. I will try to be short and sweet and give you an update of where we are on design. We are in the middle of the conditional zoning process. We've received our first round of comments and we're getting ready to respond to those to keep that moving forward. Sorry, it's not advancing. There we go. Tonight, there are 4 key decisions that we'd like to come out of the meeting tonight with your direction so that we can maintain the forward progress of the design process. The first is you're going to see a revised plan layout. That's a result of a sewer pipe easement that we had to create to accommodate AWASA sewer pipe easement requirements. Because of that, to maintain our 1,100 car capacity, we've had to increase the height 2/3 of a level. And we'll show you what that's looking like. But that's the only way we can maintain the 1,100 car minimum parking count on the reduced footprint. The third item is there has been a request to provide some office space in the deck. We've had two specific programs mentioned. One is for parking management and one is for police department. Those do have costs and other impacts, which we'll go over, but we would like to get some direction on that. And finally,
I'm going to interrupt. Not the whole police department. It would be a police substation.
That's correct. Some police department offices, not the main headquarters. And the fourth one is a result of the height, and we will step it down on one side, Rosemary Street or facing North Street, and we'll show you what they both look like. But these are really basic decisions that we simply need just to keep moving forward. And I'll go through them one by one. Just a refresher, this is part of this larger development concept, as you're already familiar with the new building and the renovation of 137 East Franklin. And that it will also involve pretty extensive streetscape and public space improvements. So first is the revised layout. What you just saw and what we showed you earlier was a structure that went from the west property line to the east property line. And we were able to create an atrium in the middle with elevators as the main point of arrival from which people would get out of their car, go down elevators, and then cross Rosemary Street. Well, after a survey was completed, it was discovered there are sewer lines running through the middle of that gravel parking lot. And after numerous meetings with OASA, we've agreed to provide a 30-foot wide easement along the eastern property line and a portion of the northern property line that will accommodate a storm sewer line and a sanitary sewer line within that easement. So we had to shrink the parking deck by 30 feet in length. So the first thing we did was look at our original layout, but shorten it and squeeze the atrium down. And it reduced our car count significantly. So we looked at an alternative layout, which is orienting the drive aisles and the ramps in the long direction of the structure, which is a more efficient layout. And this one on 6 levels gets us a little over 1,000 cars. If we add 2/3 of a level, in other words, adding 1 level on 2 bays, it gets us over 1,100, roughly 1,150. This is also showing the concept of the retail porch on part of the Rosemary Street frontage. It's showing in blue the space that would accommodate what has been given to us as the parking management program, about 800 square feet of office, plus 2 public restrooms, and then the stair and elevator core here near the crosswalk leading to that new park in Varsity Alley. So the two options are, if we try to keep the atrium, we can get roughly 1,000 cars with 7 levels. If we go with the long ramp, we can get 11 plus 1,150 roughly. Our recommendation is to go to this layout. It's more efficient, and it's really the best way to get the number of parking spaces that has been targeted. I mentioned the offices, the parking management offices and storage. They want some conditioned storage spaces, roughly 1,500 square feet. The police department substation is about 2,000 square feet. I need to point out, by adding office space into a parking deck, it lends complexity to the project. It becomes a mixed occupancy construction type, where we have to provide fire separations and egress requirements. We're bringing in now heating, air conditioning, and plumbing systems that ordinarily we wouldn't have. So it's going to result in some certain cost increases, and it does remove a few cars. So we'll just need to know if we're going to provide office space, and if so, is it going to be for one of these or for both? Those are really important for us to start factoring in to the design. You already have the CDC comments. These are some of our takeaways. I would say one of the more significant ones is the last one, which we're going to focus on now, is where do we step down? Do we step down facing Rosemary Street? There were some early comments when we showed some very early renderings about the height on Rosemary. We then studied how to push it down. We pushed one level below the sidewalk level of Rosemary Street, and then we stepped it down. But now we're looking at, is it better to step it down facing Rosemary or facing North Street, which is residential use? This is a site plan. I'll point out one other, we think, improvement. Since we have the 30-foot easement, we're recommending to bring the one of the entrances in through that to the center of the deck. That allows our retail porch to come all the way to the end and wrap the corner. And then it also circulates cars and brings them in right at the bottom of the ramp. So once they enter, they go straight up the ramp. And when they leave, they come straight down and out. And it makes use of that 30-foot space that we have. The rest of it we can treat as a landscape space with pedestrian walkways and so forth. These are, we're looking at how can we screen the northern face. We're looking at a green screen and types of dense tree planting, which would help to screen the view of it from the neighbors to the north. So the step down, this is a cross section with Franklin Street on your left, Rosemary in the center, and North Street on the right. And as you know, Franklin Street is the high point, and it steps down to Rosemary and further down on North Street. So the existing 136 Rosemary Street building is about 95 feet above curb level. If we step down on Rosemary Street, this is showing the parking deck with the 6 2/3, we call it, levels. So stepping down on Rosemary Street is an average of 39 feet. It's average because Rosemary Street slopes about 10 feet along the length of our frontage, but then it's 59 feet facing the houses. If we do the opposite way, we're up to 50 feet on Rosemary, but now down on 48 on North Street. This stepping seems to have a logic in how it follows from the higher buildings down to the lower buildings, also following the general slope of the topography, which is high on Franklin, low on North. This is a view from the southwest, the bank parking lot, Columbia Street on your left, Rosemary Street running up the middle. That wall facing Columbia Street has to be a solid wall because of we have to maintain a fire separation there on the property line. There's an existing mural there with sea turtles. It'd be a great opportunity for a really grand scale public art installation there with high visibility on Franklin, on Columbia Street. This is showing it step down on Rosemary with the higher portion facing north. This is the opposite, stepping down on North and higher on Rosemary. I'm going to go through a series of views comparing the two. This is from the northeast, and these are the houses, and that's a fraternity or sorority house, I'm not sure which, along North Street. This shows it with the higher portion facing North Street, and this shows it stepping down towards North Street. I'll just go back and forth there. You can kind of see the difference. It's worth pointing out that in these lots here, there are some large mature canopy trees, which we're grateful for. They're certainly going to help provide visual screening there as well. We're also looking at creating on these two facades a green screen concept where they'd be living walls. We'd be growing vines and plants that'll grow up along them over time. So now we're down at street level on Rosemary. looking west. This is the retail porch idea wrapping around. We're still studying different materials and cladding treatments. These are not final, but we feel good about the direction it's going. We're looking at different using materials in the porch to make it feel more finished and welcoming and active. This is where the new elevator and stair core is, putting people right across from the crosswalk. So this is showing the step down on Rosemary. This would be higher on Rosemary, lower on North. View from the west looking east, a similar thing. This is its step down on Rosemary, higher on North. This is it going up on Rosemary. It's worth noting here, even with the full height on Rosemary, there are one level below grade at the eastern end, but there are 2 levels below grade on the western end because of the slope of the street. So you really only see 4 levels, and plus the roof, even with the full height facing Rosemary Street from this end. And then finally, a close-up of that porch with the new stair and elevator core. And we introduced something that was in our original design that we liked, which is this notch in the center. It breaks up the length of that facade, which is over 300 feet long. And a number of concerns were expressed about it, which we agree with. And we like moving the vertical massing of the stair and elevator in the center, and then creating that break in the facade and breaking up the length of that facade. So to come full circle, these are the 4 key decision points that we really need to get direction to move forward. And with that, I'll open up the questions or comments.
Okay. Michael Stevenson, can you put back so I can see the whole count? Can you take your screen share down for us? Do you mind?
Absolutely.
You might have to bring it back, but just give me, I had to be able to see. Okay, I saw Jess's hand up for these are clarifying questions, then Karen, then Amy, and I'll come get the rest of you, but we'll start with Jess.
Questions only, correct?
Yep, clarifying.
So my first question was, when we're talking about those office components, that's kind of a new variable, which makes sense, but I'm wondering what the cost impact, what's the ballpark of what we're talking? If we're adding those things, what really are we talking about? Because I don't have any sense of what that would mean.
We have not done cost estimates for those particular things. I think we could respond in writing, and within a couple of days, we'd have to get with the general contractor.
Councilmember Anderson, this is Maurice. Our goal was to try to get some of those numbers for you all prior to the CCES meeting next week. When we do focus on some of the design elements, so that you not only would have a chance to weigh in and we get your opinion about different aspects of design, but then also the cost associated with that as well. So we will certainly get that information to you prior to the CCS meeting.
Okay, great. Well, then can we wait on that one? Because I don't know what to say about it if I don't really know what the fiscal impact is, unless you're just asking whether we think it's a good idea to have it or not. I mean, obviously, if we need the office space and y'all think it's a good place to put it, it's not a problem. But I guess the real issue is, to me at least, is the fiscal impact, because it doesn't seem like it would have a huge number of traffic impacts or other issues, right? I mean, what am I missing?
I think you've raised a good point. I think we're asking generally if that's something that you would be supportive of or interested in us pursuing, and then we can provide that information to you next week as we're moving this process along. So yes, I think if you're generally interested in it, we understand, we all agree that we should know what the costs are and before we make any decisions. So we can certainly have that information for you next week. But just generally, if you're open to the idea of having some office space there that would house a police substation and parking management.
Okay, so as long as you don't hear that people have a huge concern about it or don't like it conceptually, then you'll move forward with finding the cost, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. And I didn't see an exit or a way for folks to get out to North Street and then out to Columbia. And I'm wondering if that is because we haven't sorted out some things, or is that no longer a component? Why is there only one entrance exit?
There are two. We only showed one plan. The one that you saw was on the second level. The second one is on the western end of the deck, and it's up on the third level. So you only saw one plan, but there are currently two.
Oh.
And we very much agree a third access point would be very desirable. It requires gaining control through some neighboring properties. And at this point, we don't have knowledge that that's a possibility.
So are they
Add to that,
on Rosemary Street?
yes, they're both on Rosemary Street. To answer, I think the question you're asking is another point to Columbia Street or perhaps North Street, which has been talked about. And
Correct.
we just got the TIA, and Manager Jones said that that'll be presented to council a week from Friday. So that's being digested by staff and by us, quite honestly, to look at is one or more of those preferable or necessary for the best function of the deck. And then we have looked at that holistically in terms of the design, how that property meets up to have that opportunity either to Columbia or to North Street.
So I do understand that that it would involve acquiring other property. I'll save my comments. Okay, just checking because I
think it's fair to say it wouldn't cause a major redesign of the deck. It would be incorporated. I'm sorry?
It would or it would not?
It would not.
Okay. Okay, because I mean, that seems keeping, well, again, I can't stop with the comments, but it will keep all that traffic from dumping out onto Rosemary, which I think is really, really important. But, okay. And I had a question, which Brian Peterson, I saw you were on. Yeah, there you are. I was hoping you could, hello. I was hoping you could help understanding, well, I mean, a lot of things. And obviously I would love to hear your thoughts generally about the redesign. To me, it looks better than what we saw that went to the CDC, but particularly about this, whether we step down at Rosemary or the other side. I guess to me, it looks more sensible to have it step down on the back since you're getting to that residential neighborhood. And I know that it's not going to maybe be a low density residential neighborhood forever, but it still seems to me like when I look at it, that makes sense. But we were also concerned about that canyonizing effect along Rosemary. Now, knowing that the building across the street is really even higher than this one, does that make it more of a concern or less? Like, should we not care because there's already kind of a taller building in the mix? Or should we say, oh, we should have it step down on Rosemary so that it doesn't feel like claustrophobic? Can you, or, you know, that is my question. And anything else you can think of to make me smarter about the step down issue would be great.
Sure. Glad to be here. Hello, everybody. And I agree that I think there's been a lot of progress made with Michael and his team's work since that CDC version. I think I shared a number of concerns that were similar to what the CDC, their comments were. And I think number one, the porch, I was concerned because it was shrinking because of the office space being added there. I think it looks great to see it wrap around the corner and putting the drive in that easement and getting it off of that front facade just makes that a lot better. I think the relocations of the stairs and the entrances will help bring people from inside the garage to the porch area and not just have them drive into the garage, get out of their cars and walk to the corners and go down the stairs, you know, and leave the building at the corners like it has before. And so I think there's been a lot of work done to help do that. Another thing that moving the stair did, it helped break up the massing a lot. And so I think there's a lot of progress there. And getting to the issue of the height, I agree that the canyon effect is something definitely to worry about. But I looked at and I think it's great that Michael provided that cross section looking at the street with both buildings. And when you look at putting the height on the Rosemary Street side, you still have not a bad proportion. When you look at the cross section of that space, if you look at the area where the new garage is going to be, you get kind of almost a 1-to-1 ratio of height to width there. Yes, the office building across the street gets higher, but the basic street section, I don't think it looks extremely canyon-like. And the other thing is that with those changes in the massing, with the chunks taken out of the facade, with the reworking of the stair, I think that having the building be a little bit higher, those moves help to break up the massing quite a bit. So, I'm looking at the before and after, this is the first time I've seen these images. I think I would be comfortable with having the height to the front and step back to the neighborhood, and sort of working with this idea of going from high across Rosemary to the garage and then stepping down to the residential areas. So is that helpful?
Yeah, that's really helpful. I can't, my spatial relation skills are not good enough to imagine what happens when you kind of change that relationship, but what I'm hearing is what I originally kind of sensed was that maybe having the height on Rosemary actually makes more sense, even though originally we were kind of thinking the other way. Yes,
and it has a lot to do, and here's a plug. I just recorded a couple of YouTube videos of my urban design 101 lecture that a few of you have seen, and so.
Oh, hey, we've got time. We're at home.
That'll be out there. But one of the things that I talk about is how important the first couple of stories of a building is along the street. So I think that if we get a very lively massing, some ins and outs, and there's some changes of materials, the verticality of the stair, I think that's what's important, is the first 20 or so feet. And if we have some voids, the porch actually slices out a lot of massing there in the corner. And with the stair there now, that will lead directly across the street. The fear, I think, with the CDC comments, and what I thought is that porch, no one would ever use it because you'd walk out the corners of the building. So I think now it's much more central. I would say I think the offices, I think those are that's very important space for folks, but I think when those offices are put in there still needs to be the thought of how they actually are designed. Office spaces are not the most engaging pedestrian places. So I think that, having the porch along that whole length of the facade, like originally was intended, would be ideal. So I think the offices diminish that a little bit, but understanding that having that office space there is important. So I think there's a trade-off in the pedestrian friendliness of the facade and having office space there that folks might visit now and then. So I think that's another issue too. But all in all, I think that I see a lot of improvements. And I will be at the meeting, the work session next Friday. I'll be doing a talk on parking garages. And I know there's been some folks that had advanced and been looking at other examples of materials and things. So we can have a talk more about the aesthetics of it.
I think that would be great because it's such an important location. And I have one more for you, and then I'm going to stop, which is I felt like that atrium really helped make it feel like there was some permeability, or that it again, it didn't just break up the facade, but it made it feel like it wasn't this huge hulking block.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if there's anything else that could be done besides breaking it into two buildings, which I know is expensive. But you know, what can be done to make it not feel so big and blocky and huge?
I think the materials that are ultimately selected, I think that is now what comes up in the next phase. And I think, Michael, looking at the materials for the porch, it looked like there was some wood that was being looked at there. I think that's where you get into the next level is, you know, once you have the basic massing of the building, then what you deal with is articulation, which is, you know, how is that done? What are the materials? You know, how big do the pieces feel? So it's sort of working into the next scale that you can further refine and break the building down even more, kind of in that next level after the big pieces are figured out.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I had Karen, then Amy. And then I'll go with Alan, and we'll get you all in, don't worry.
I had, I think, 4 questions. The first one was just about the number of spaces. It's been a while since we first started talking about this, but my memory, we had said maximum of 1,100 spaces. Am I remembering that wrong? Because I think I heard when the presenters say minimum of 1,100 spaces. Could someone clarify that?
I can tell you my understanding. I don't know if you want me to answer, but the financial models that I've seen presented were based on 1,100 cars at a minimum. So just to make the financial projections work the way they were shown. So that's what we took as our target. And then right now we're with the 6 2/3 level, we're getting about 1,150.
Yeah, Councilmember Stegman, our goal was 1,100 spaces. I think we've been pretty consistent about saying that that was the goal for this parking garage based on the financials and then also what we envisioned our needs would be when the garage opened and then in the future once the office building is built downtown, what the needs would be.
Okay. The next question I had was around the bike lanes. I think we've been talking so far, kind of assuming, of course, we want bike lanes. That's a good thing. You know, I've learned that, you know, the downtown partnership actually is opposed to bike lanes there. And that part of the potential plan for West Franklin Street restriping was to have those bike lanes and not have bike lanes on West Rosemary. And I wasn't clear that, I'm not sure where that discussion is, if the town has agreed to that or, but it seems important to this discussion because we don't want bike lanes to nowhere. If we've talked about if we're taking them out and then put them, it seems crazy to take them out on one side of the street and put them in on the other. So just wanted an update on what our plan is, if that's still evolving and how we're going to, we need to kind of figure that out before we figure this out, I think.
I can just share that I've heard from Downtown Partnership at length. No decisions have been made about the West Rosemary bike lanes at this point. They have petitioned to have them removed. We're still evaluating. I think we need time for our staff, including Brian Peterson, to work together. I don't think that decision has to be made while we're doing this parking deck decision because the street is there and it's the width it is already. So that decision doesn't have to play into the timing of this decision. And I'd ask the Downtown Partnership that we probably weren't going to get to the West Rosemary bike lane decision process more than likely till the fall, to be honest with you, because we need to see how it works on Franklin Street with the restriping, with the new bike lanes there and see what happens. And we'll learn more from that. And there's also a work group that's working on loading zone areas. So there's a lot going on right now that I don't think making that decision without knowing those other pieces is really beneficial for us. I think we should wait, let the staffs work on all those components, and it doesn't have to affect the parking garage decision at this point in time.
And if, yeah, and I've heard a little bit from the bike community, but I don't think we've gotten full input on that decision either. But if we were part of our kind of negotiation around the potential office building, if that was part of it, that could still, that timing and decision-making would be aligned.
Yes, that would be more aligned, right?
Okay, so we could take it up then. Okay. I also wanted to ask about, I think this is the first time for me, I'm hearing about the idea of a police substation in the parking deck. So I was hoping, I don't know if that's Maurice or somebody, just to share a little bit more about how that idea came up, the thinking, why we wanted there, et cetera.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that we were taking into consideration. One, if the police station, the main headquarters on MLK is moved to another location, we thought it would be good to have a substation, a visible substation downtown. And we thought that could be an ideal place. And the chief felt that about 2,000 square feet could accommodate their needs there. We just felt that the police need a presence in our downtown with a station of some sort, and that made logical sense to consider that at this point.
Thanks. And my last question is a follow-on to Jess's around the costs of adding that potential office space. My question is around, it sounded like the extra cost, some of the extra costs would be putting in heat and air and some of those things. But would those already be, I think having restrooms there is an important piece. So would having the restrooms already require some of those things so the office would not be as much of an extra cost, or is that a whole separate kind of cost?
Often public restrooms such as these have space heaters in them, but they not necessarily air conditioned. That's quite common, and certainly something like this on a sidewalk on a parking deck. So it would be adding the office space would add a different level of services we'd have to bring to the building, a very different type of built environment.
Okay, thanks. I think that's all my, yeah, that's all my questions. Thanks.
Thanks. Amy, then Alan, then Hong Bin.
First, I don't know who could answer this, but I know at our last meeting, we were talking about office and the idea of affordable office came up. Is that where the police substation and idea came up, or was it separate?
It's a separate issue. And I think when we've had numerous discussions about affordable office, and if I remember correctly, I think and this is wrapped up more so in the economic development agreement with Grubb Properties. But I think there had been a willingness to consider affordable office space in the 136, 137 project. So I think these two issues are separate. I will say that, based on things that we know about the success rate of commercial office spaces, putting them in garages is just not, there's not a great success rate with those types of projects. And so we'd probably rather see some sort of commercial or office space across the street there in 136, 137.
Okay, so are you saying that so for instance, for like parking management space, is that a big town need, or is it just we said, well, if we have some office here, that would be one group that could fill it? I'm just trying to figure out what's driving.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, we do need a space to manage the garage, and so it made sense to consider putting it there. It doesn't have to go in the garage itself, but we thought that it would make a natural place for our folks who are not only managing parking, but then also providing support with our downtown ambassadors and that type of thing as well, that might be a good office space for them.
Okay.
And Maurice, can I throw it? We currently have parking office space in the Wallace Deck.
In the Wallace Deck, that's correct.
Okay. The second one is about kind of cost. And I know that at this point we're at the preliminary concept plan phase. So things aren't detailed out and we're still working with kind of big issues. But keep remembering that we're the client. Normally, when I look at somebody's design, I want the best design possible because I'm not paying for it.
That's right.
But this is good. This is it's a town building and it's our building. So as we move forward and before we really get much farther, I'd like to figure out a way that we can understand costs for the different levels of architectural detailing that we're talking about. And I don't know whether as we see more designs, we get kind of, here's a basic level, here's a good medium level, and here's an enhanced level, just some way that we can see how we're spending our money as we go on.
And that's part of our goals for next Friday at the CCS meeting, is to have more of that conversation with you all and to talk about some preliminary estimates on the cost of design and any changes, significant changes we'd want to make. So
okay,
and of course we'll refine that as we move on, but we'll certainly try to have some more information for you when we talk about it next Friday.
Okay, and especially as we start talking about all that, like the facade finishing and things like that, and how that works in. Just as we proceed through this design program, I'm thankful that you provided those images of Rosemary Street so we could get an idea of those heights. Is there any way we can just have a straightforward site section also? Just running north-south. So, illustrations are wonderful, but the site section for me is really, it's just plain, and I can make sure that I know what I'm looking at.
Absolutely, we can create that.
That would be great. Thank you. And this is a question for Brian. For the CCS meeting next week, I know one of the important components of the design we're talking about are green screens. And if we could have some more information on that. I know that one of the facades we're talking about doing a lot of green screening on is the north facade. We're also talking about an urban environment with pretty close proximity to the other buildings. So just if we can talk a little bit about survivability and options, if it's really realistic for us to be thinking that that's a way that we can handle that, or if it's not so realistic and we need to talk about other things. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have Alan, then Hong Bin, then Ty. I know.
Yes. So I have about 3 questions, and hopefully they won't take too long. My first question is, I'm wondering where in the design of the deck bike parking would go on the exterior. I don't think I saw any particular spots in the renderings for bike parking. Oh, I think someone's on mute.
Thank you. I was muted. Yes, we are showing bike racks in the porch and additional bike racks inside the deck in some of the corners. So they're scattered around. We think where people would find them to be handy locations.
Okay, thank you. And then this, I imagine that the TIA, once it comes, would shed some light on this particular question, but regarding that access point that is by the retail wraparound porch, I'm wondering if the egress where cars will come out, if there's going to be if there would be a right only lane, or if there would be both the right and left hand turning lane.
Well, I don't know I don't know if the TIA has made specific recommendation about that. So that I think that's really a decision that needs to be based on the traffic flow.
Got it. So
yeah, we can certainly take up that question next week as part of the discussion over the TIA.
Okay, great. And then I appreciate Karen asking the question about the substation. I was also curious about the reasoning there. I appreciate the explanation. My last question is, I know that there have been some concerns expressed that the retail porch may go unused at times. I was just trying to think about alternative ways that space could be used if it's not being used for a stretch of time. I'm wondering if there's been any thought to alternative uses for that space in case we don't have much retail going on.
We have had some discussions about that, and have talked about, arts from an arts and cultural standpoint, are things that we could do there. So yes, we are looking at different options for when it's not in use.
Good. Thank you. I'm good.
Hongbin, then Ty, then Michael.
Are we only asking questions or we are making comments as well?
Clarifying questions only.
Oh, clarifying questions only. Okay. So I heard that there is this, we're going to change this, the design with the atrium in the middle to the design with long ramp design. I'm trying to envision, of course, I heard you that you're saying that that's going to be more efficient. I can see that part. But I'm just trying to envision that what the experience is for the user inside the parking deck. Wouldn't the parking deck of that size, if there is no break in the middle, which allows like a light penetration, wouldn't that feels very dark space? I mean, given the size of the parking deck?
Well, of course it will be lit. It is a quite a large footprint.
Yeah.
I think the atrium would have helped, but I don't think this will be particularly oppressive or anything of that nature. I do think that having a single long ramp, most people would find it easier to get up and down. With the ramps going the other direction, you would have to make a 180-degree turn to get up one full level or down. This one is just one. You just go up once, one straight shot, and you're up or down a level. I think that's an advantage to it. And but I like the atrium myself, but given where we are and the constraints placed upon us, I think the long ramp version is a better way forward for us.
So is there any, well, I can, of course, we all know the RTP parking deck, they have an atrium in the middle. I think at early phase of the discussion, that one is used as the merit of this design with atrium in the middle for our parking deck. So I'm just trying to envision that the RTP, that big parking deck without an atrium, I think it's going to be, the experience is going to be very significantly different. So is there any way that you can, like you show us this two design with the taller, the higher part on Rosemary versus on North Side, there are different versions of that. Is there any way that you can give us some illustration of what the user experience is going to be with and without the atrium inside of the parking deck?
We could create some model views from inside, certainly.
Yeah.
Just to go back to the comparison to the RDU deck,
Yeah.
Our entire deck is smaller than just one side of the RDU deck. That is, I think it's 8 bays wide. So this deck would fit easily within just half of the RDU deck. So I think it's hard to compare the scale of these two, but we could provide more information to address your concern.
Okay, that's great. Then there's another question is about this the wall on the north side that you said it has to be a solid wall. Isn't it, but I remember that there was some discussion and say that there's going to be an exit or entrance on that side going to Columbia Street. There was going to be exit from that side. Is that not in the plan anymore?
That's the west facade.
Okay.
Yes.
Facade, right.
Well, we had some previous discussion, and we do agree that having access either to North Street or to Columbia would be very beneficial for the parking. I mean, for the traffic flow. And we hope that agreement can be worked out with those landowners, that we can get that.
Yeah, that has certainly not been ruled out. And once again, we'll have some discussions about those entrances and exit points as part of the discussion over the TIA next week.
Oh, okay. So that decision has not been made yet. It's not
It is not.
made
Yeah.
decision that's going to be a solid wall on the western side. Okay.
Not yet, not till we have the TIA information. And I think what they're trying to tell you is it has to be a solid wall without windows and breaks and openings. I'm not sure that the egress, if the egress was to come off, I think that could be allowed, but I don't know. The fire department will have to weigh in and tell us on that.
You're right. We have to make a protected opening. But the west facade can't have windows because of its proximity to the property line. Part of the north facade has very limited amount of windows it can have. About the eastern 1/3 of it can be open because the property line steps, it jogs, but the western portion of it can have very few openings.
Okay. So then I remember that earlier this year we have this review of the hotel concept plan that's on the other side of the Columbia Street, and I remember that there is a long solid wall in the first floor as well. And at the time we talked about there's going to be some mural or big wall. But I think for this one, I would like to hear the comments from Brian. What do you think that to have two large, long, solid wall along Columbia Street at that same location?
Well, I feel that and it's a really important concern. I think this wall is set back quite a bit from the street edge. And so I don't think it's as dire of an issue than if this garage was right along Columbia.
But it's going to be 6 or 7, 6 and 2/3 story high.
Well, of course,
very big wall.
That parking lot and the site where the bank is,
right?
That may be someday. I mean, if downtown, if it changes, more development comes in, there might be a building there someday. So I think, from what Michael said, that wall has to be solid because it's a zero lot line condition, and so that's a building code concern. And so I think the art is it is a way to deal with that, and to not have just a blank concrete wall there. So I think that's an opportunity that we have to try to create something of interest there.
Is there any way that you can finish the facade is not going to, it can be like there's some like window facade, even though it's not functioning window, but it has a more structure feeling instead of a big concrete wall. I think a 6 or 7 story wall with that length, I think is very huge visual impact. I think I would like to see what it's going to.
I don't know, Michael, it could be, I mean, even if it's a solid wall, it could be subdivided into.
Right.
Yeah, we can articulate it, with concrete, add relief, ins and outs, and so forth. I think we'd want to, consider if we're seriously thinking about it being a palette for artwork, that whatever we did wouldn't compete with the artist's intent, so find the right balance there.
Yeah, well, I think that's just the question. I would like to see that more considerations to that and how to manage that 6-story wall. I think it's
just a point of clarification on that, Michael. How tall is that wall in the western elevation? Because I don't think it's 6 stories tall. I think it's shorter than that.
That is, it really appears like a 4-story wall, 4 to 4.5 story, because much of it is below grade, and that's the high part of the site.
Yeah, so if you can present some illustration or visual illustration to show us what visually will look like on the Columbia Street, I think that would be helpful. Okay, so that's my question.
Thank you. Ty, followed by Michael.
Sorry, my internet keeps giving out. It's having a rough night. So if I cut out, that is why. I had two quick questions. The first was those heights you showed us across Rosemary Street. I think it was 96 feet or something. Is that the current Wallace deck height, not what's going to be the office building?
No, that is the current office building, the old NCMB tower.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. And then my second question was for the office space that you added on the site plan. It was just that like green rectangle. And I think on that slide you mentioned that was only like a few hundred square feet. So is it that same footprint for the 6 stories? And that's how you get the total square footage for the office space?
No, that's only one level. That we showed is around 600 square feet.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So is it that same footprint on each of the 6 levels?
No, it's only 800. It's only showing at 800 square feet right now. And we have to make a decision whether we want that at all or more or less or what we want, but only on the first floor or that ground floor. I won't say first because it is below grade, but we would only do it on one floor is the thinking. So it'd have to,
Okay.
if you wanted more space, if you decided you wanted to have the 2,000 square feet for the police substation and the 1,500 for the parking, we'd have to take out more parking on that level to do that.
Okay, so it'll all be on that first level. Okay, gotcha. All right, yeah. I'm good.
Yes.
Okay, Michael Parker. A lot of Michaels on here tonight.
I guess a couple things. First of all, as regards the office space, we'll see the numbers. I don't have any objection to it in principle, but I suspect it's going to be pretty pricey space. But Brian made a comment about, in terms of street activation, and I was wondering if we do choose to put in office space, could it be somewhere else on the building? Does it have to front onto Rosemary Street because it's largely administrative space? Could it be somewhere else in the garage so that we do a better job of activating Rosemary Street? That's my first question.
I think we could look at putting it on the east side facing the that easement, because we have a sidewalk, providing access back there. I don't know in the case of the police substation if they would feel that that gave them kind of the eyes on the street that probably they're looking for, but that'd be an alternative we could consider. on that would be the northeast corner.
Second question is, and it may be a moot point since it just may not be possible to have the atrium is what seems to be the case now. But what are the cost impacts of not having an atrium? Is not having the atrium likely to reduce the total cost of the building, leave it the same? Are we at least getting some financial benefit out of not having an atrium?
Well, I think all things being equal, this design without the atrium and the ramps oriented the long way is going to be a more economical design, to achieve 1,100 cars. I think I can safely say that. We didn't do a side-by-side cost comparison, but this is going to be a simpler structure, more space efficient, and so I do think you get a benefit from it economically.
And then I guess my last question is, I really appreciated seeing the views of what the building looks like from Rosemary Street. I sort of build on what Hangden said. Could we also see for next Friday what the building looks like from North Street? Because I think, I'd really like to understand how this will be perceived in the neighborhood. So what the folks on North Street will see and what the folks on Columbia Street will see. You're on mute again.
Thank you. We can create those views. We started creating views from North Street, and it's actually a bit challenging because the houses are very close to the street, and there's a really dense tree canopy. So we weren't actually sure how much you could see, but we will try to create those, give you an idea of that.
Well, that's actually a plus. If
it is.
On North Street, you can't see the garage, and you can show us that. That's a plus.
Right.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, I had a couple of questions. We've been talking about solar on the roof, knowing that we would have to have a third party do that because we can't get the solar credits as a local government. But is there a way to have showing in your drawings when you're doing this to show a solar canopy cover on the top levels, either full or partial? And it may be that we're just putting in conduit to do the solar eventually, but because of the timing. But in order to actually see what the building could look like, I'd like to see, is that possible to show a solar canopy rendering of some sort?
Absolutely. We actually started to put that on these views, but it made it harder to see the stepping, which we really wanted to give you a good sense of. So we took it back off for that reason only.
Okay.
But we can definitely show that.
One rendering to show that we're considering it, because the public got a little confused that we weren't considering it anymore. But it also is a reality if we, which I hope would move forward with, I would want people to actually have that visual ahead of time to know that it's going to have that up there. And that's part of the visual height of the building as well. And it may be there's a way to do it so it's not quite as visible from North Street. I don't know, because you're having a 2/3 level, and just see what that comes back to.
Definitely.
So one quick update on that, Mayor, is we have a sustainability associate on our team who is working with town staff to explore that option. So I think it's great to visualize it for this body, but we're also working on actually making it happen too.
Oh, great. Good. Okay. Then can I ask, Brian, are we widening the sidewalk? Is that part of this plan? I know the sidewalk on that side currently is rather narrow. Is that part of this concept at all, or what are we thinking?
Not the sidewalk itself, but the porch expands back quite a bit.
Okay.
It's creating a kind of alcove. And I think it seems to me quite much more space than what is now. That was, I think, a real advantage of this idea is that it allowed you to put the building right up, to the easement line. I guess it's not a right of way here, but with the porch, it allows you to have some breathing room there. So it'll make it feel like that's a lot more expansive, but I believe we would still have the same sidewalk and the paved area.
Okay.
Maybe a different material. I think we probably want to design that area to match what the porch is, I'm thinking. So, it may not be divided into a sidewalk and the brick along the curb. It might feel much bigger because it's all one material that blends with the porch. Am I correct, Michael, on that we're not, the actual site, the streetscape is kind of the same dimension?
Yes. So presently, the property line of these parcels actually lies right on the curb. So the sidewalk is actually within an easement on the properties. And the sidewalk is presently 9 feet wide, which is a little tight. So we do think of this porch, as Brian described, as a widened sidewalk. It really feels like it's public space, and that it's just seamless between the sidewalk and that space. And that's how we hoped it would be used.
Okay. All right. Thank you all for your clarifying questions. Well, you can wait for your comments. Des will come back and you can ask more. We're going to let the public weigh in now. Again, we ask for your patience as we try out this new system. We're going to call a couple of names. The first person will be entered in. And again, we ask you to reintroduce yourself and share your comments with us. And please try to stay within the 3 minutes. And then we will call the next person in. And there'll be a little lag time between all that. So appreciate your helpfulness. Michael, are you ready to call the names? Are you seeing them in order? I know that we have
the only names that I have to call are what Amy sent in the email.
Okay.
So the names that I have, and Amy can tell me if that has changed as soon as I find the paper that it was written on, is the only names that I have that wanted to speak on this were Susanna Dancy, Eve Ing, and David Schwartz. Is there anybody else that we have, Amy?
So if you go to the attendees list, Michael, on there, there's some other people and they can do their hand raising in there.
Yeah, I'm saying those are the names I was given to call upon. The others, nobody's raised their hands yet or done anything else. And so Susanna Dancy is first up.
Okay.
And where is Susanna? She disappeared. She was here, but she is.
I'm here.
Amy brought her in.
All right. Am I
Welcome,
muted?
Susanna.
Thank you.
There you are.
Okay, super. Let's see, I am here as chair of the CDC to share some of the comments, but my gosh, it's a totally different deck now. So I will, so I'm struggling a bit with what to provide, or what feedback to provide, because my notes have been based on the previous deck that we had seen and commented on, and felt very strongly about particular issues related to it, many of which have been addressed. So I will try to touch on big picture stuff. From, the urban design principles that the CDC often discusses are massing, street engagement, and permeability. And we had significant concerns about the previous design and how it, particularly in those three areas. And I think that the applicant has made great strides. This is my opinion. I think the applicants made great strides on those. There certainly have been a lot of changes. Some of the things I want to mention just very quickly that might still be applicable are that some of the concerns about the height of the building, that perhaps burying a level or two more of the parking deck might be a way to bring down the height, particularly on the north side, and just that transition to the residential area. I think one of the council members mentioned building two smaller footprint decks instead of the one big deck, and that would be a way to break up some of the massing on it. And again, stepping down the height of the deck on the north side, which it sounds like y'all are already leaning towards that. And I think that's a nice improvement. So those are things that I want to mention from a massing standpoint that still apply. It is a big deck. I mean, it's long. It is better articulated now than it was before, but it's still a very large deck. And I think that they've made great strides, but it is something to keep in mind. Street engagement. Our concerns had been that the retail court was not connected to the entrance to the deck at all, and it looks like that has been addressed. So that's a nice improvement. I do like personally, I like the way that it wraps around the corner. I think it's a nice, the way that the porch is located, I think is more visible, and that'll be good for it. And then, there were some other suggestions. Incorporate public art, put solar panels on the top, and add more street level greenery and plan for shade on the plaza. The earlier version didn't have any type of shade at the location where people would be, and particularly since that's on the south side of the deck, there's a real need for shade if you're going to have people in that space, and so we were just encouraging that. Just in general, large projects like this, whether they're single buildings, or single large structures, or multiple buildings, have the power to transform an area. And I suspect that that's kind of the intent here with this whole big project. So I commend y'all for spending a lot of time on it and thinking carefully about the direction that it's headed. And again, these are my personal comments, are that I see lots of improvement in what you're seeing now. I think that it is going in a much better direction and addresses many of the concerns that CDC had when we viewed it to begin with. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And we look forward to you seeing it again in much improved version.
All right, great.
Thanks for joining us.
Okay, it looks like David Schwartz is up. Eve Ing, I still do not see Eve Ing, so I guess it's David Schwartz is up next. Or not.
David, can you show yourself and unmute? There you go.
Yeah.
Fine. You got me?
No, you need to allow video.
Do you really want to see me?
Let's be nice
No
to.
choice.
Okay. I haven't showered in 6 weeks, just kidding.
Well,
All right.
I think you're having some technical problems with your backdrop.
I don't have a backdrop.
Oh,
Go ahead. If you want to share what you'd like to share with us, please.
Turn off the video since it's not working. Good evening. My name is David Schwartz. I'm speaking for myself and for other members of the Chapel Hill Alliance for Livable Town. We all support the goals of creating a modern wet lab space downtown and a more lively and attractive streetscape along the 100 block of East Rosemary. But as we've heard tonight, there are other important town goals that also need to be part of the conversation. I'll briefly address 3 of them: financing, traffic flow, and building design. First, financing. The town's proposing to take on a significant financial liability and additional debt at a time when we're likely entering a recession. Town finances may be constrained for some time to come. Before moving forward with the project, the public should be given an opportunity to review the town staff's detailed business case, arguing that the $28 million bond issue will pay for itself. That way the public can assess whether the cost and revenue assumptions are sound. Concern is that if the parking revenue does not cover the bond payments, then our bond rating may be adversely affected across the board, making it necessary to raise the general fund to finance other projects. And we consider tax increment financing generally undesirable because it relies on projected future revenues that may not materialize. Second, traffic. We've heard some discussion of this. We do not yet know the results of the traffic impact analysis. I heard that that's now available, but we haven't yet seen it. So we urge you to get those results before you commit the town to a decision regarding the design of the project. Common sense suggests that a volume of over 1,000 cars entering and exiting a parking structure along Rosemary Street, which is rather narrow, during rush hour will create dangerous turning movements and serious congestions. And so it may be necessary to make sections of North Street or Henderson Street or East Rosemary Street one way and probably create another entrance to the parking garage on North Street or Columbia. Then finally, building design. We fully endorse the comments provided by the town's Community Design Commission. And I was happy to see that the design the updated design has taken into account some of those comments. And I think I agree with what others have said, that what we have now is certainly an improvement over where we began. We feel in general that redevelopment along the 100 block of East Rosemary should conform to the adopted West Rosemary Street guidelines, which recommend that buildings along the north side of the street be no more than 4 stories tall. If it's truly necessary to create 1,100 parking spaces along this block, then there may be other ways to do it that we should explore, including putting 1 or more levels of parking underground, using a mechanized car stacking system to reduce the amount of space needed per vehicle, and perhaps coordinating with other Rosemary Street property owners to include some structured parking in the redevelopment of other parcels. It may not be necessary to put it all right there in the footprint that we're talking about tonight. There may be other places that it could be distributed. In addition to getting the scale right, the parking structure should be attractive and should fit in well with the character of the adjacent historic downtown and historic residential area. How do we achieve that? The slide presentation that accompanies my comments contains photos of several recently built parking garages, some not far from here, that are attractive and that blend in well with their historic surroundings. The parking garage we build on Rosemary should equal, if not surpass, the architectural quality of these other examples. And I'll just add as an aside that from the renderings we've been shown, it seems that the designers have been taking their design cues from the CVS tower across the street. And I don't think many people in town would consider that to be an attractive building. I think we'd prefer that we take our design cues from Town Hall and from the buildings along Franklin Street. So more of a brick facade and masonry rather than emulating.
I hate to interrupt, but your 3 minutes are up since you're speaking as an individual, not as chair of the HDC.
Okay, so we appreciate you taking the time to get this right, and we look forward to further improvements.
Thank you, David.
Michael, before you call next, John Reese is out there and you've sent something in via chat or question and answer. Did you wish to speak? If you'd like to speak, we're happy to bring you in, or we'll just take your comments and record them into the public record and pass them on to our staff as they're doing this. Would you like to speak? You just appeared, so I guess so.
No, I don't. I think that if you can hear me, I just wanted to send those in. I don't need to speak to them. I think they're pretty clear. Thank you.
Just so we saw John's comments about including the bicycle community when designing the bike storage areas in the deck, which makes a lot of sense. And then he gave some good examples of some different parking deck and an example of where bike racks didn't work in another parking deck. So we'll incorporate those comments into the public record. Okay. Michael, is there anyone else that there will sign up?
Nothing I'm aware of. Do you have any other folks that are wanting to speak, Amy?
I don't, but if any of the attendees wanted to speak, they could use the raise the hand button located in the bottom center for a laptop and the top right hand corner for iPads or *9 on your phone. That will show us a indicator on the list, and then we'll be able to bring you in.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak from the attendee list? You can also still send your comments in. This is a concept plan stage only. Won't be voting. We're just transmitting comments. So you're welcome to send your comments in. Email would probably be best if you're not communicating with us tonight. All right. Okay. Amy, if you see someone, there may still be an opportunity since we're learning and new at this, but we appreciate that. Okay. Council members, I'm going to bring you back to comments. And again, we're not voting. These are your comments. I'm going to try to collect your comments so that we can send them back in some corners. You know, if we have 4 of you wanting one way and 4 of us want the other way, that's going to be a little interesting. So just remember, I'd like you, before you start, to run down the list of 4 so I can get an idea of the 4 big decisions they asked us about. And I'm going to remind you, are you interested in office space? Knowing we know that the cost has big, are you interested at all in, let's break that into 2 parts. Sorry. Do you want office for parking management, and do you feel police substation is a good idea just in general without, and I know that can be changed if we find a cost that that's out of proportion. Number 2, are you okay doing 6 2/3 levels overall? It sounds like, and let's combine that one, sorry, with, do you want the step down to be, if you're okay with that, do you want the step down to be on the north side, the North Street area, or the Rosemary Street area? And then, well, the Owassa, I don't know that that's a question. You rearranged it with the Owassa easement. So let's go with those 2 big questions. Was there something else?
Mayor, it was simply that we're recommending the long ramp orientation if anybody objected to that.
I'm going to ask everybody about office space in 2 parts. And then I'm going to ask you about long ramp orientation. And then I'm going to ask you about which side you want to step down on. Are those the big decision key points? Does that cover it? Okay. So Jess, we'll start with you, and then Amy, I'll move. Y'all are on that in order on the screen. Okay. I know everybody wants to share their comments. We'll get to you. Jess?
Well, first, I think I'll answer these 3, and I wanted to say a couple other things as well. So.
No, you're welcome to say other things too.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think, like has already been said, that this is really already a huge improvement on what went to the CDC. So I'm gaining confidence that we can get to a really great design. I do think this is a really important area. It's downtown, it's next to our historic district, and it kind of feels like an entrance into downtown. I know if we're trying to move downtown down MLK/Columbia, that it will feel different, but still, I really think that design is going to be crucial here, even though it is a parking deck. But I really feel like the improvements are amazing already in a week. So thank you for all that work. I can tell that a lot of work has gone into this. I think we have gotten some really nice pictures from other places. So I think we have maybe, what would be helpful on Friday would be to see some kind of design concepts that could fit in well there. And I think it was Amy who asked for kind of the cost associated with different facades and stuff. So that would be great. However much of that we can get. I do still feel like the the massing and the lack of permeability is a little daunting, but I don't know if it's possible to break this into 2 buildings, as Ms. Dancy was talking about, but I will, if that's an option, then please show us. In addition to the cost for the office and the substation, I would also really like to understand what the other alternatives are. It's obvious that we think it's important enough to put it here, but is there somewhere else that it can go? Or if we don't have it here, what happens? I guess is what I would like to understand, since it's a really new idea. I guess understanding what would happen if we don't put it here, or are there other options downtown? Are there other options in other parts of town? Just to understand if we say no, what do we do about parking management and a police substation? Would be really helpful as we have that conversation with the cost. And I think as Councilmember Ryan had mentioned earlier, it would be really great to see that view from the back to really understand what that's going to feel like. I still really want us to figure out that exit out onto North Street. I like the entrance being put up along the side now more, but I think having 2 entrance exits on Rosemary, I don't think that we need to see the TIA to know that that's going to be super interesting. So in terms of traffic, so I would love to see more about what we're doing with that exit onto a different side. I do like the height or the step down on North Street, and the long ramp orientation to me seems like kind of the only option that makes any sense to me right now, unless you tell me otherwise. I think in terms of the public art wall, I think if we're going to have public art there, we probably shouldn't put money into a lot of articulation, but if it's not going to be public art, then maybe that's a different conversation. But I think we have to decide what that's going to look like, because we don't want to put money into putting, false windows or other things if then we're going to try and put public art on top of it. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I agree with the street level green and shade, absolutely. I'm getting a lot more of that. And I know that that's often left out of these renderings so we can see the building. So as we progress, it would be great to understand what that's going to look like once we figure out what happens with the building, because I think those are really critical to not only maintaining the character downtown, but also making it a nice place to actually be in the summer or wherever. So thank you for all the work, and thank you for the additional information tonight.
Thank you.
I'm going to do Amy and then Karen, and then I'll come down to the next row. I got y'all in boxes like Hollywood Squares. So I'll get you.
Okay. You're dating yourself, ma'am.
Oh, sorry.
I'd like to echo Jess's comment that I think this is a really important entrance to downtown, especially since it's going to house the parking for the visitor center and lots of folks coming to the university. So I think the design is crucial. I think things have gotten a lot better. I like moving that elevator tower in the middle. I like wrapping the porch around. I think it's really good direction that we're going in. I very much like the green walls. I think that the CDC, they made a comment that part of the character we talk about in Chapel Hill is our green and our trees and all that. And what we may be able to do is kind of do a modern take on that for this building, right? So we're not planting mature trees, but let's see how we can transform that idea and make that essence of Chapel Hill really be expressed in this building. So I thought that was a really interesting idea. I don't know if we own the trees on the north side of the building that you keep talking about. We do have wonderful screening there for mature shade trees. Unless we own them, we shouldn't be counting on them for screening purposes. So I'd like to hear exactly who they belong to. On the office space, I can see one of the concerns I heard at the CDC and that I share is it's activating the porch is going to be crucial. And I think it's going to be less of an issue during the daytime. I think at nighttime, it's going to be a real consideration. So we don't want it to be a dark hole. We don't want it to be a place where we have trouble or whatever. So I can see having an adjacent police substation that kind of opened onto that space, was a 24-hour space. I can see that maybe really helping for those nighttime concerns, especially if it's near those public restrooms. We want to keep those open. I know we've had trouble keeping other public restrooms in our garages functional and clean and safe. So if that would help, that would kind of persuade me that that was a good use. I think Michael made the point that do we need to have the office space for if we do parking management? Does that need to be right on the street? If it buys Brian some more porch, I would be happy putting that around the side since it's not, you know, again, I think if we have some office space, anything it does to help enliven the space is really important. If that's not going to enliven things much, putting it around the side would be fine. From the drawings you showed, it seems to make sense to me to step down to the North Street side. Again, I'd like to see those sections just to confirm it, but I don't think that the canyon effect is going to be substantial. Pam had brought up the point about the solar panels on the roof. So if we can get an idea of their height in the sections also, I don't know whether that's going to feel like adding another story or not so much, or it's going to be different. So I think that when we're trying to make that decision about where the step down is, if we can take that into account, that would be helpful. I think the 6 2/3 stories make sense. I know that when we were looking at all the breakdowns of the spaces that we're losing and the spaces we're going to need, I didn't feel like we were really over parking this area with the 1100. So I think losing spaces would be a problem for us. The sidewalks in all over Chapel Hill are generally too narrow. 9 feet in a downtown is really bad. I'm glad I understand how the porch will contribute to having a more spacious feeling there. Anything you can do that would help give us some more in that 9-foot area, especially if we want to have trees, that's just not enough space. So I don't know if you're, even if you can give us 3 or 5 more feet would be great, but anything over that, I think that would really help create a better environment downtown. And I agree with Jess. I think we need to get a clearer idea of whether we can have that exit out onto North Street. I think that's and how we're going to accommodate that and what that means for the design. And I am no expert on parking decks. If the long ramp is the way to go, then I'm with the long ramps. Thank you.
All right, Karen, then Alan.
I'll try not to repeat, but also really think there's a much improved design from the previous one. So really appreciate that. In terms of the questions, the other questions, I think the levels make sense. It sounds like the number of spaces is tied to the cost and what is financially feasible and viable. So, want to see those numbers when we get there around that. In terms of the step down, I think the step down on the North Street side makes most sense. And I support that. In terms of the office, definitely see why we need some office space for the management. I also share Michael's concerns for both that and the police, potential police space around activation. I think that's so important for this. And I would not want us taking up a lot of that frontage for offices. I think that would just be a missed opportunity. So placement is going to have a lot to do with whether I support those or not. I really like the idea of a community-driven mural on that huge wall. I think that would be really interesting and inviting, and we could do a lot of cool things with that. So I like that. The green screen, living walls, all good. Around the bike parking, certainly support John Reese's comment around placement. Also, I think we should consider long-term bike parking as well as part of that parking. In terms of, I like the long ramp design better. I think, parking decks that have a lot of turns, there's a lot of safety issues for cars and pedestrians. So I think the long ramp is better. I do, that made me think about pedestrian safety within the deck, which if we've talked about, I didn't hear it. So I would be interested in hearing a little more about pedestrian safety within once you park. It's hard to kind of feel safe sometimes and visible within parking decks. I really like the retail porch as an idea. I share some of the current concerns that have been expressed about using it. And if we don't use it, it's gonna look not great. So I do really want to hear, and I know Maurice and staff have already been talking about it. So just hearing more details about how we would manage that and the cost of managing that as part of this project. One of the sort of ongoing operational costs of this project. Wondering if we've talked to Downtown Partnership about partnering with them, or maybe they kind of do some of the programming, or kind of how we can do that sort of full-time and economically for the town. Going back to the police department substation, certainly cost is a factor in that, but also I hear the point about it being there providing folks a sense of safety. I'm also wondering about the flip side of that, if we're thinking of these restrooms as those 24-hour access restrooms that we've been talking about for a while, and especially providing access for unsheltered folks and others, if a police substation there might detract from people wanting to feeling safe going there. And so I think we should probably get some input on that from, maybe CEF, IFC, some of the folks who could give us some input on that question. And I think that is all my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. I think I got all the, Alan and then Hongbin.
So I like the idea of stepping back toward the neighborhood along North Street. I'm interested in having a possible parking management and police office space there. I do want to see the cost projections before committing, and I'm interested to see what differences in cost there would be with office space that's, say, along Rosemary Street or elsewhere in the deck. I also prefer the long ramp design. I think that's safer. With respect to the bike parking, I think it's important that there be some clear signage at and around the deck, just so that bicyclists can clearly know where they can put their bikes. I know as a council, we've talked about solar roofing over the past couple of years. I'm interested in seeing how that could work on this deck. Regarding the TIA, it would be nice to see some, and I don't know if we could get this next week or at some point, but it would be nice to see some possible variations of traffic patterns coming in and out of the deck, particularly around that access point by the retail porch. I know I had asked earlier in our time together about right-only lanes versus right and left lanes, but just want to see some of those kinds of designs that could mitigate traffic concerns. And the renderings that were given, I liked seeing those renderings of the greenery on the rear of the building and on the side of the building. I'm just curious about this, but I wonder what greenery might look like on the side of the building facing East Rosemary Street. So I'm wondering if we could have just a rendering to see what that might look like. I'm curious about that. And then lastly, I like the idea of having that retail porch area, be space that is first and foremost retail porch, but also space that could be used for something else. So, I like what Maurice had to say earlier about the possibility of using that space for arts and cultural activities. And if we can keep going down that direction in terms of thinking about other ways that space can be used, if there is no demand, or if there are long stretches of time where we don't have retail, I'm definitely in favor of exploring more about how that space can be used alternatively. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, did I hear you on whether you were good with the long ramp?
Yes, I'm good.
Okay, sorry, I got distracted there. All right, Hongbin, followed by Ty, then Michael.
Well, I think I'm not going to repeat a lot of the comments. I think I'm in agreement with many comments by my colleagues. I think this design has the significant improvement with regard to especially the design articulation on the side of Rosemary Street. I think having this elevator tower in the middle to break the long the mass of the building, I think is significant. I think we all really appreciate that improvement. I think this green wall design on the side of the north street, north side of the street. I think it's a great design that we all would like to see that to be a success. I think I agree that that represent one important features of Chapel Hill. And with police station and the parking management office, I think that's a great idea. I think I can see that how's that going to improve the overall performance both of this parking deck as well as the safety of our downtown. I think this parking deck, it's giving its size. I think I do want to see the parking management office and some police presence nearby. I think that that has been the discussions for other large size parking downtown parking decks. I think if we can think through it and see that what is the best way to manage all those issues before they come to the issue, I think that if we can address that at this design stage, I think that's a great thing. That if we can do that. For the long ramp, I still trying to envision with this because it's going to be like 3 times the size of the current parking. It's a very big footprint of that parking deck. I still would like to see a rendition of what the user's experience is going to be within that parking deck. For the retail porch, I think it's conceptually is a very good idea, but I think several of my colleagues have mentioned, both Alan and Karen mentioned, it is a big part of it is how you're going to run it. It could like, if we are going to have if it demands a lot of resources and the personnel to run the programs, I think we need to take that into consideration. If we are going to put that in place, we want it to be a success. So I think it needs to be part of the design in our discussion. I think the 2 major issues that we haven't discussed today, one is the business case of this parking deck. I think that will determine how many, whether the 1,100 spaces is the minimum or maximum. What are the other considerations? I think that it depends on what kind of business case that we can make for this parking deck. So I'm looking forward to see that. And also the TIA information, I think that's very important for us to make the decision of other exits or where to put them. I think it's very important for us to understand the traffic situation around both the Columbia Street and the Rosemary Street, and to see what is the way to manage the traffic so that when this parking deck is built, it will have appropriate traffic flow. And it's we do not want to see that this large parking deck and create significant traffic problems on the Rosemary Street. So I think if we can consider them at this time, I think that we need to have those informations together before we finalize what the design plan is going to be for this parking deck.
Ben, can you tell me whether your step down is to the Rosemary or North Street?
I think North Street, I think it makes more sense to have the step down.
And what about the long ramp situation?
Oh, for that, I would like to see a rendition or some illustration of what the user experience is going to be.
Okay.
I think that given the size of this parking deck, I just have a hard time to imagine that within the parking deck, it could be very large space. And I'm afraid that it's going to be very dark space inside.
Okay. All right. I've got Ty who moved, and then Michael. Ty.
All right. Let's see. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what's already been said, so I won't repeat any of that. I'm down with the stepping down on North Street. The long ramps seem fine with me. If we need the 1,100 spaces to make the deck financially feasible, really big in support of having those 24/7 public restrooms. We have been talking about those for a while. And then in principle, I'm also fine with the office space, especially if staff, sees a need for it, and would love to see if we were able to move that. Mary, the usage of the porch. And I know that this would be really hard with the current pandemic, but if Joe's team or staff could work together to potentially identify some of the end users or people that, might be kind of the vendors that we're thinking of having at this space, and engaging them during the process of designing the space to see kind of what they're looking for, what they would really want in a space like that, just to ensure that we are designing for them rather than just, throwing out these ideas and hoping that the space will be used in the future. I think that would be great. But like I said, there's obviously a lot of challenges around doing that in this current time. But anything that you could do to move towards that would be great.
Okay, I think you answered all those. Thank you. All right, Michael.
Yeah, so I think overall, I'm very encouraged by the design. I think it's moving along nicely. I'm glad that we've been able to address a lot of concerns, raised by the folks at the CDC and elsewhere. Before I forget what my answers are, let me try to answer the questions. So number one, I think the North Street step down is the way to go. I'm fine with the long ramp design. I think 6 2/3 stories is fine. In terms, I don't have an objection in principle to either the police station or the management, but as I said earlier, I think there may be better places to put them, and economics will, certainly have a big impact on my decisions. I would also just like some clarity, since it was mentioned about street activation, whether the police substation is sort of a 12-hour activity, a 24-hour activity, because that also impacts in terms of, we talked about safety and where it might be best to put it. I think I got all your questions, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so a couple of comments. Again, I agree with pretty much everything I've heard so far, in terms of traffic, TIA, all of that other things. A couple of points about the design. I think that we have, and I'm sure Michael Stevenson is thinking about this, but I see that this garage and the new office building and potentially 137 all need to relate to one another in some sort of a positive way. I don't believe these buildings can be completely different from each other. There have to be, I think, some design congruencies. And so I think I would like, as we start thinking about, whatever we, as we make further design choices about the garage, I'd like, somebody to be able to help us understand, if that's having any positive or negative impact on the new office building. The other thing that this may be adding a level of complexity that's foolish, and if so, so be it. But, I've seen a lot of interesting uses of garage doors of late. And I was wondering if we could somehow think about at least part of the retail porch having a garage door construction to make it really practical to use it, on those wet, cold winter days, because I can't imagine doing a lot of retail business, in a January when it's 20 degrees and snowing. So maybe there are sections that could have a garage door that could pull down to sort of give it some level of weatherproofing, even if it's not conditioned space. Alternatively, perhaps as we think about this, some parts maybe could have infrared lamps in this roof, again, to make the space really usable for 12 months a year rather than perhaps only 9 or 10. Again, it may not be a good idea, but I thought at least, it's worth thinking about. That's really, my only comments. I think, it'll be, I think we need to have a discussion about whether we truly want art. I think it's a really intriguing idea on that west facade. And as I think Jess or Amy mentioned, you don't want to invest a lot of money in articulation or other things if we're going to, paint a mural on it. But otherwise, I'm really pleased with where we are. And, you know, if this much progress was made in the last 2 weeks, I can't wait to see what happens in the next 2 weeks.
All right. I'll try not to duplicate a lot of things, but then I'll sum up. First, I'm really pleased too with how far it's come. It's a much better outcome from where we started. And you heard all the good comments that we got from CDC and others. And I appreciate all the ways of thinking. I do know the Owasso easement was quite a site constraint. I think you've handled it well. I think it's come a long way. I wanted to know if staff was willing to make a short list of 1,100 or so parking space garages in our community that people, council members could go visit. I do know of a couple. I think you could get a better sense just to see what those look like. I know one's under construction, you can't really go in it, but there are others. And I just, if staff can send a list of 2 or 3, I think that would help council members see what the experience looks like, and the public too, because then they can sort of put that together. I know ours would be slightly different, but I think that's helpful. I agree with the step down to North Street. I think that makes the most sense. I also think the long ramp actually makes really good sense. On the office space, I think we have to have something there for a presence. It is a large space. It is where people come. I also know that we need storage space for our parking management groups as well. And so I don't really care which place you put it, but I do know we need that. I'm not so convinced about a police substation, but I could go either way, and we need to see the costs associated with all this. There may be other opportunities for a police substation near there. We've learned a lot about retail and offices and parking garages. As you hear, you have to add in all the other amenities to that. So I do think we need something there for parking management. I would rather parking management kind of weigh in into what that is, so we'd know better. I also like the idea of working with the bike groups to find out what's more practical for bike storage. When you put it on the second floor or somewhere that's really out of the way, they're not going to transverse all the parking to get to bike storage. And I thought that was a good suggestion of long-term bike storage as well. There might be some individuals who want to do that as well. Okay. I love the mural on that wall, but if you want to frame the wall so that it looks like bring it in some, so it's not the entire wall, that may be a way to articulate the wall a little bit better. But I think Brian has much more experience at this than we do, so let him weigh in on that and ask our arts groups. Okay. Like I said, we'll be getting the TIA. Staff is going through it right now and trying to ask some questions back. They will get that information to you that will also inform. But from my understanding, the design was taking into consideration there would be some kind of other exit out of this deck, and that's going to be incorporated. And I hope that's still true. That I think that we're all in agreement that we think maybe not right this minute, but we all believe that there's going to have to be another way out of that deck. So it looks like the majority of the council is in favor of the 6 and 2 stories long ramp version with the step down on the North Street side. There was different opinions about the office space depending on what answers we get back from staff with what they're really looking for, where else it could be, and how much it costs. And I think we'll have to have that information before I think we can make a further recommendation on that. We all have concerns about traffic flow, so we want to hear what the design, and I must say I do think bringing it to the corner was a much better improvement with the exits and the breaking of the massing. So we're really, really pleased. Michael Stevenson and Joe Dye, were there other questions you needed answered, or did you get enough feedback for the questions you were looking for us to weigh in on?
From my point, this was excellent. I appreciate the discussion and the clarity you've given us. I particularly wanted to figure out if Mr. Reese, did he provide comments? Because I'm very interested, as others are, about how to really make the bike racks work, you know, so they actually do work for people.
Okay, we can get his comments to you. We can also connect you with him, and he's a chair of our planning commission right now, but he's been on the transportation and connectivity board. He's part of the bicycling advocacy group here as well, so we can do that.
Thanks.
Okay, Joe Dye, did you have anything else question-wise?
That was all great. Thank you for all your comments and input. Very helpful.
Okay, Brian Peterson, any clarifications you need from us?
No, I think I'm good, and very pleased, and it was great to hear all your comments. Very insightful ideas coming from you all tonight. And I think it's making this an even better project as it goes along.
Michael Sudol, did you need anything else from us? I know we have to vote to transmit the comments, but was there anything else you needed from us?
No, that's all.
Okay. Mr. Town Manager, anything else on this item?
No, Mayor, I think it was a very helpful discussion tonight. And we appreciate the time spent on this by council and your comments. And we will compile those comments and make sure that it helps as we move forward with the design and with some other elements of this. And we look forward to the conversation that we'll have with the council at the CCS meeting on May 1st at 8 a.m.
Okay. Can I have a motion to transmit our comments, whatever that is on the packet?
R8.
R8 to transmit comments to the applicant, which is kind of us.
Okay. So motion by Ms. Anderson, second by Mr. Parker from what I could take. Are there any additional comments that weren't covered? Y'all did great. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay. Motions are unanimously transmitted. A friendly reminder that we are still evolving and sending you messages about meetings. We are trying to plan for a council meeting next Wednesday night. Just look for that. We're not sure we have to have that, but we're trying to work on a few things we may need you to vote on with budgeting items, things of that nature. And then the CCES meeting is planned for Friday morning. Do we still want to keep the 8 o'clock time, or what were you thinking, Mr. Manager?
I mean, that is the time that we've normally held those meetings. If council would like to move that, then we would certainly be open to considering that.
Sticking with the 8 o'clock?
I might have a final at 8 a.m. on the 1st, but trying to get that moved. Either way, not a fan of 8 a.m., but we'll make it work.
Okay. Okay. All right. We'll see. Well, good luck with your exams, by the way. All right. This is LDOC, right? Or last week of classes. So yeah.
Yeah, this is my last week of college.
Hey.
Wow. Well, I know this has been a stressful time for everyone in many different ways. I commend you all for hanging in there and staying focused on what we need to stay focused on. And again, appreciate your patience and your willingness to work with us as we try to evolve how we do our town business. We'll start sending you the notes that we can from the EOC meetings that we're having. It's just they evolve so fast and we're riding on the next meeting before we even get the notes from the last one. So it's been a little interesting. Look forward to talking with you all soon. I think that's the end of our regular agenda. Anything that covered? All right. Meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Use your gavel.
I don't have a gavel here. Sorry. Clap my hands. I was like, good job.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.